Just give me a second. So chapter 1, you are not your mind, the greatest obstacle to enlightenment. Enlightenment, what is that? A beggar had been sitting by the side of a road for over 30 years. One day, a stranger walked by. Spare some change, mumbled the beggar, mechanically holding on to his old baseball cap. I have nothing to give you, said the stranger. Then he asked, what's that you're sitting on? Nothing, replied the beggar, just an old box. I've been sitting on it for as long as I can remember. Ever looked inside? Asked the stranger. No, said the beggar. What's the point? There's nothing in there. Have a look inside, insisted the stranger. The beggar managed to pry open the lid. With astonishment, disbelief, and elation. He saw that the box was filled with gold. I am that stranger who has nothing to give you, who is telling you to look inside, not inside any box as in the parable, but somewhere even closer, inside yourself. But I am not a beggar, I can hear you say. Those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the deep, unshakable peace that comes with it, are beggars. Even if they have great material wealth, they are looking outside for scraps of pleasure or fulfillment, for validation, security, or love, while they have a treasure within that not only includes all those things, but is infinitely greater than anything the world can offer. The world enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego likes to keep it that way. But it is simply your natural state of felt oneness with the being. It is a state of connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, something that almost paradoxically is essentially you and yet is much greater than you. It is finding your true nature beyond name and form. The inability to feel this connectedness gives rise to the illusion of separation from yourself and from the world around you. You then perceive yourself, consciously or unconsciously, as an isolated fragment. Fear arises and conflict within and without becomes the norm. I love the Buddha's simple definition of enlightenment as the end of suffering. There is nothing superhuman in that, is there? Of course, as a definition, it is incomplete. It only tells you what enlightenment is not, no suffering. But what's left when there is no more suffering? The Buddha is silent on that. And his silence implies that you'll have to find out for yourself. He uses a negative definition so that the mind cannot make it into something to believe in or into a superhuman accomplishment, a goal that is impossible for you to attain. Despite this precaution, the majority of the Buddhists still believe that enlightenment is for the Buddha, not for them, at least not in this lifetime. So, he very beautifully it's explained here that what exactly is we're talking about enlightenment, the journey of spiritual enlightenment, being spiritually enlightened. So this is a journey, not in, there's nothing in the outside world. It's a journey within. It's a journey in your inner true core self, which is the oneness. And yes, when we saw the video yesterday, that oneness cannot be identified because it has no form. It is just a feeling. It's just a feeling at the sub end of the substratum inside of you, which makes sure that you realize that we are all connected and we are all part of this one source, this oneness. So it is not something which is, as they say, that the ego likes to frame it, something fancy, something difficult, or something which is in fashion. So these are all the meanings given by the ego. So this is something which is not in any outside experience. So that experience is only when we get to the inside of us, inside of our own being, and getting to feel that connectedness with the true source. That is actual enlightenment. So it can happen, a momentary glimpse can happen, but yes, with practice and with complete surrender on this inner journey, you can definitely get to that state of being in the realization and your connection with the true source in that oneness. You used the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? Being is the eternal, ever present, one life beyond the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. However, being is not only beyond but also deep within every form as its innermost invisible and indestructible essence. This means that it is accessible to you now as your own deepest self, your true nature. But don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can know it only when the mind is still, when you are present, when your attention is fully and intensely in the now. Being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. To regain awareness of being and to abide in that state of feeling realization is enlightenment. There's a very nice and a deep hidden message here. Now, he's referring to us as beings. Now, there is a journey in which, when you come, or if we talk about our day to day, we are always in the doing. हमने ये करना है, I am doing this, I am going to do that, he is doing this, I am not doing this. So we are always concentrating on the doings. But whereas we are human beings, not human doings. So the hidden message, enlightenment, is actually realizing, that feeling of realization of that connection with the source, of a true journey of being rather than doing. So it's also said that, enlightenment is a journey from doing to being. मैं ये कर रहा हूं और ये मेरे साथ हो रहा है. So that realization of a state in yourself, which silently pronounces it as deep surrender to the God, to the Almighty, to the universe, and surrendering your doing and getting into a journey of being. That realization of this feeling, of that connection with the source, is true enlightenment. When you say being, are you talking about God? If you are, then why don't you say it? The word God has become empty of meanings through thousands of years of misuse. I use it sometimes, but I do sparingly. By misuse, I mean that people who have never even glimpsed the realm of the sacred, the infinite vastness behind the word, use it with great conviction, as if they knew what they were talking about, or they argue against it, as if they knew what it is that they are denying. This misuse gives rise to absurd beliefs, assertions, and egoic delusions, such as my or our God is the only true God, and your God is false, or Nietzsche's famous statement, God is dead. The word God has become a closed concept. The moment the word is uttered, a mental image is created, no longer perhaps of an old man with a white beard, but still a mental representation of someone or something outside you. And yes, almost inevitably, a male someone or something. Neither God nor being, nor any other word can define or explain the ineffable reality behind the word. So the only important question is whether the word is a help or a hindrance in enabling you to experience that toward which it points. Does it point beyond itself through the transcendental reality, or does it lend itself too easily to becoming no more than an idea in your head that you believe in, a mental idol? The word being explains nothing, but nor does God. Being, however, has the advantage that it is an open concept. It does not reduce the infinite invisible to a finite entity. It's impossible to form a mental image of it. Nobody can claim exclusive possession of being. It is your very essence, and it is immediately accessible to you as the feeling of your own presence. So the realization I am, that is prior to I am or this or I am that. So the realization I am, which is prior to the concept of I am this or I am that. So it is only a small step from the word being to the experience of being. It's very interesting. A lot of people now do not like to use or refer to the supreme energy, the universe, or the God or Almighty with the specific word God, because you know and a lot of religions are mainly responsible for creating this dogma amongst all of us, and the hype and the negativity around this word, that this is my God, this is your God, my God is best. So ultimately there is only one God. So rather than talking about God, people have now started talking about the godliness, the universe, and a lot of people refer it is at to it as that source of energy from where everything is going. And why is he using the specific word being is because then there is no form. Because हर एक चीज में ना हम form ढूंढते हैं. Like when it comes to the ego can only, ego is a big part of our mind. So it's, a lot of places the mind is referred to as the egoistic mind. So ego क्या है, हर एक चीज को ना एक आइडेंटिटी दे देती है, एक पिक्चर दे देती है. आई एम दिस, आई एम दैट, आई एम दिस, आई एम दैट, आई लाइक दिस, आई डोंट लाइक दिस. सो जहां पे हमारा सारा आई की आइडेंटिफिकेशन इज विद एन ऑब्जेक्ट और समथिंग विच इज एक्सटर्नल, वो सारा का सारा ईगो के प्रमाइस से या ईगोइस्टिक माइंड के प्रमाइस से आ रहा है. सो जब हम उस किसी भी चीज की रियलाइजेशन, स्पेशली द रियलाइजेशन ऑन अ जर्नी, इनर इन दिस इनर जर्नी ऑफ स्पिरिचुअल एनलाइटनमेंट, जब हम माइंड से इसको समझने की कोशिश करते हैं ना, वो हमें, इसे कहते हैं ना, घुमाता रहता है, घुमाता रहता है, घुमाता रहता है. आई एम दिस, आई एम दैट, आई एम दिस. बट a basic realization of I am, plain simple. Anything that comes after I am is given by the ego. But a plain realization of who I am, this true being, that is the core seed. So if you are coming from a point of some kind of an association with the word I am, it's coming from the egoistic mind. It's coming from the ego. But with just a realization of this fact that I am, plain simple, I don't need to link it with anybody. It's just this core feeling of the connection on my inner journey with my source. I am that being. What is the greatest obstacle to experience this reality? Identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction. But we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it. So it is considered normal. This incessant mental noise prevents you from finding that realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind, made self, that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at all that in a more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed that he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, I think, therefore I am. He had, in fact, given expression to the most basic error to equate thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in a state of apparent separateness in an insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict. A world that reflects the ever-increasing fragmentation of the mind. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one, and therefore at peace, at one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as one with your deepest self and life unmanifested, at one with being. I will repeat this line. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one, and therefore at peace, at one with life in its manifested aspect or the manifested form, which is the world, as well as one with your deepest self and the life unmanifested or the unmanifested world, at one with being. Enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and of continuous conflict within and without, but also the end of a dreadful enslavement to incessant thinking. What an incredible liberation this is. Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that block all true relationship. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is this screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there is you and a totally separate other. You then forget the essential fact that underneath the level of physical appearances and separate forms, you are one with all that is. I repeat, you then forget the essential fact that underneath the level of this physical appearances and separate forms, you are one with all that is. By forget, I mean that you no longer feel this oneness as a self-evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but you no longer know it to be true. A belief may be comforting, but only through your own experience. However, does it become liberating. Thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there is nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body. But when the process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have disease. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. To put it more accurately, it is not so much that you use your mind wrongly, you usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is the disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion. The instrument has taken you over. So when we are talking about, what is the greatest obstacle in this realization, in this feeling of this realization, or in this journey of spiritual enlightenment, the biggest obstacle is your mind. Because वो इतना ज़्यादा ड्रामा क्रिएट करके रखता है that it hardly lets you, because see, at the end of the day, the mind is a part of you, but the mind, with our association with it, that we are our mind, has given it so much power कि जो deep core है, that we are all one, that's the oneness, and we are not separated. See, because this world we are living in is the manifested form, which is the outside journey, which is outside of your sphere. But the world which is inside of you, which is the unmanifested world, there is that feeling of that being, of that oneness, or that connection with that source, which gives you that feeling that we are all one. It's interesting to note all these people who were, those called the enlightened beings. They had it very difficulty when they got this realization that, deep down, we are all connected to that same source and we are all one. They found it very difficult to even, say anything to the other person. And yes, there are examples, if you read certain books, that they had that strong connection, that before the other person could say what he was trying to say, they were able to perceive what he is trying to say. So सबसे पहले एक realization in this inner journey to know who we truly are. Firstly, discarding your mind because you are not your mind. And then getting into that connection with that oneness, with that source, and getting into that arena of that, oneness with everybody, that everybody is one. We are one, deep down, deep within. But ये है कि माइंड ने, ईगो ने उस पे इतने अच्छे अच्छे लेयर्स लगाए हुए हैं कि उन लेयर्स को पेनिट्रेट करके, निकाल के, taking that journey inward, that deep dive inside of you to get to that source which is there inside of you. It's not to be found anywhere outside. Enlightenment is not an off the rack thing. गए खरीद लिया पैसे दिए आ गए. No, it is nothing to be bought. It's already there. It's just a journey inside of you, penetrating or removing all the layers of your mind programming, your belief systems, your judgments, your criticism, and getting in touch with that inner self of yours, which is that source, which is that oneness, which is connected to all. I don't quite agree. It is true that I do a lot of aimless thinking like most people, but I still choose to use my mind to get and accomplish things. And I do that all the time. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean that you use your mind. Just as dogs love to chew bones, the mind loves to get its teeth into problems. That's why it does crossword puzzles and builds atom bombs. You have no interest in either. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean stop thinking altogether? No, I can't accept maybe for a moment or two. Then the mind is using you. You are consciously identified with it. So you don't even know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it. And so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. So the first step in this beautiful journey, in this inner journey, is to stop this identification with our mind